Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Why do you reject Catholic morality? Does it seem unrealistic to you, or old-fashioned, or outdated, or maybe you feel that you found a better morality? Well, welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. In this hour, we ask you for your reasons for rejecting Catholic morality. We invite your calls, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. And today's guest is Trent Horn, staff apologist for Catholic Answers. Trent is the author of a bunch of stuff, including Answering Atheism, Persuasive Pro-Life, and his latest book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. Hi, Trent.
Hello, Cy.
So you have asked this question before about why do you reject Catholic morality? And what would you say is the number one reason people reject Catholic morality? Is it rational or irrational? I mean, is it, I don't know, I just am not into that, or is it more intellectual?
I think there's a variety of answers that I hear, and I think they all have reasons. Some of them are more rational than others, I would say. But I think many people would say, well, they have a different moral standard that they would use to, judge certain actions, and they think that the standard they have is just fine, and there's certain aspects of Catholic morality they have problems with. The way we pose the question, it's interesting. I think most people I speak with who are not Catholic or disagree with Catholic morality, they don't reject Catholic morality wholesale or every single moral principle that Catholics believe in, because most will agree about the wrongness of killing innocent human beings, the wrongness of theft. Most would talk about the wrongness of adultery. No, not everyone. Even other issues related to things in Catholic social teaching, such as many people in society who would support things like just wages, for example, or the rights of workers, the rights of immigrants. There are some aspects of Catholic morality they're very in support of, while there are other issues maybe related to the issue of the right to life or sexual morality that they do a complete 180 on. So it does vary between the person, but ultimately I think it's because they have their own moral standard that they adhere to, and it will have its reasons and its inconsistencies, and that's something to certainly talk about.
Would you say in the whole, say, 2,000-year history of the Church that this sexual revolution we've seen in the second half of the 20th century and ongoing is the most serious challenge to Catholic morality, the most kind of widespread? You almost say it's a revolt against Catholic Christian morality.
Well, I mean, there have always been the most serious challenge of Catholic morality from beginning to now and forever is going to be sin. I mean, there's no way around that. And sin is, of course, a Hebrew word that means to miss the mark. And it's the idea that there's God's way of how we ought to live, the life that we should choose, how we should relate to one another. And then there's my way. And sometimes that aligns with God, and then we're living in God's will. When it contradicts God's will for us in that regard, it would be sin. And the sexual revolution is one modern manifestation of that. But when it comes to things like sexual morality, I mean, you've had this all throughout church history. I mean, it would be the 17th century, I think 1644, when John Milton, the author of Paradise Lost, wrote a book on divorce laws in England. And he was making the case that they should be divorced, if you will, in the metaphorical sense, from their Catholic foundations and Catholic canon law, because he said the purpose of marriage is not to unite man and woman for life in a sexually exclusive union. It's for it's so that man can have apt and cheerful conversation. And when you're just sick of your wife, well, you should be free to go somewhere else. So I mean, we've had these, we throughout history. But I think the modern sexual revolution in the Western world, its effects have been felt widespread through technology. Two things that I can think of that have made it more profound than other moral disagreements in the past would be, first, hormonal contraceptives. Contraception has always existed. I mean, in ancient Egypt, I think people used to use like alligator skins as a barrier method of contraception. But hormonal contraception is fairly recent. And then the other would be the internet. Both for spreading dangerous information that encourages dangerous lifestyles, as well as spreading things like pornography. So those would be two things that the sexual revolution in modern times is something where technology has really caused it to infect many, many people and turn away from God's plan for their lives, God's joyous plan for their lives, including in their sexuality.
Yeah, well, when there's a question mark at the end of our topic for the day, Trent Horn is probably here. And the question today is, why do you reject Catholic morality? Maybe on something like abortion or sex outside of marriage, or, as you were just saying, Trent, contraception. Is there some area where you reject Catholic morality and you'd like to share the reason with us and discuss it? 888-318-7884 is the number. That's 888-318-7884. It does seem that the spread of mass media, you said the internet, but the spread of mass media has in some ways been so good for the world and in some ways has undermined our moral fabric somehow.
Yes, it's kind of interesting when you look at media, especially Western media, but we see these influences also in other parts of the developing world. I know there was a study done a while back it was in a South Pacific island region of the world, a place like Fiji, something like that. And the study looked at the incidences of anorexia and bulimia and other kinds of eating disorders among women and adolescents in these communities. And they found there was a sharp increase in eating disorders and body image disorders after the introduction of internet and Western media, television, and things like this. And what a shocker. I mean, people, when they view mass media, they become conditioned to view the world in a certain way. It's almost interesting. People will view fictional programs like sitcoms, but then also non-fictional, in quotation marks, things like reality television, which, as we all know, is heavily scripted, that will push a certain kind of narrative onto people without them even realizing it. As you watch these stories on television, in film, there's the narrative that what matters most is being able to do what you want, getting your happy ending, having material goods, having youthful vigor and looks. And so it's slowly, it doesn't just come right out and say this, but as you consume more and more of this media, that becomes essentially a kind of idol that we're subconsciously drawn to. And so then when we're called maybe to choose a different path in life that God has given to us that cuts against what the world has for us, there's this pull and there's this tension. And we see this, of course, in media when it comes to sexuality. How sex is depicted in media is completely unrealistic from how it is in real life and in loving relationships and the bond of marriage and things like that.
Really? You think so? It's not realistic, though? We see on sitcoms the sexual relationships and their consequences? I'm shocked to hear that, Trent.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. But I'm sure in most of these sitcoms, especially the ones with very, very promiscuous characters,
Yeah.
But after 3 or 4 seasons, I think they would be bedridden from all the sexually transmitted diseases and completely broke from all the child support claims they would have.
Right.
But just as you never see characters go to the bathroom in sitcoms,
Yeah.
no one ever leaves to do that. On 24, Jack Bauer never had to run off during the whole day to take care of anything like that. Television puts forward a certain reality, and then it distorts that reality by hiding or disfiguring very healthy, very normal parts of the way we ought to live. And same thing happens on social media as well. So that's why I'm really eager to talk to individuals today who reject Catholic morality, large parts of it, maybe certain issues they have problems with, and just see what they think about it, how their narrative of the world and what inspires that, and the narrative that we have from God and his revelation through his son, Jesus Christ.
888-318-7884 is the number. That's 888-31-TRUTH. Happy to take your calls. We'll take a quick break and be back with Trent Horn addressing why do you reject Catholic morality? And I know when you're saying that about reality TV, you're not saying anything about Gold Rush, the greatest show on television. I know that Gold Rush is not included in that. We'll be right back on Catholic Answers Live.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
We hear it every year. The perennial question, what are you giving up for Lent? And there's nothing wrong with doing without certain things you may have an affinity for. But this year, why not turn the question around and ask, what are you taking on for Lent? If you don't have a daily time for reading the Bible, we recommend you make one. And to help you with those difficult passages, we also recommend a daily dose of Trent Horn's latest book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Bible Difficulties. Hard Sayings is the perfect book for your Lenten journey. Trent looks at dozens of the most confounding passages in Scripture and offers clear, reasonable, and Catholic keys to unlocking their true meaning, deepening your understanding of God's holy word. Make this Lent one to remember. Order your copy of Hard Sayings today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Luke 6:36, Jesus said to His disciples, "Be merciful, just as your heavenly Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." He wanted them to meet persecution with a superhuman charity that demands the absolute surrender of the self to God's purposes. He cautioned them not to judge themselves better than others, and that correction must always begin with themselves. But He was not telling them to stop using their intellects in the cause of distinguishing right from wrong. He told them to imitate their Heavenly Father's mercy, after all. As we all know, the Father's mercy often expresses itself by correcting and holding people accountable. He shows us that love must always be our motivation. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
So why do you reject Catholic morality? What's up? Maybe you don't appreciate the Church's teaching on sexuality. Maybe it's another part of life. Maybe the Church's teaching on money, or the Church's teaching on marriage, or who knows? Well, if you reject some part or all of Catholic morality, we'd love to talk with you today. 888-318-7884 is the number. Trent Horn is our guest. Trent is staff apologist here. And, I should mention again, the author of Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. And, one of the things you tackle in there is kind of the development of morality. At least that's like a sub-theme when you look at the Bible and you say, well, the morals of the earliest patriarchs, for example, are not exactly the same as the morals we have today as Christians.
Well, one thing we have to remember when we read the Bible is that just because the Bible records something, it doesn't follow that it recommends it. Neither does the fact that the Bible regulates a practice that it follows as that practice is something that's good or something that everyone should take part in. So when you talk about the patriarchs and the early Israelites, for example, yes, the patriarchs engaged in scheming, lying. You have, for example, Jacob, who was quite the deceiver, though he himself, with his son Joseph, his other children end up deceiving him, and the circle comes full tilt. You see all kinds of behavior among even among the earliest heroes in the Jewish faith and even the Christian faith. I mean, think of St. Peter and his denials of our Lord, that the Bible records people not necessarily being their best. Sometimes they fail in following God, and that serves as a warning to us not to imitate that behavior, but to imitate when they allow God to work in their hearts to conform themselves to His will. So that's something we always have to remember when we look in Scripture and see bad acts that are recorded. Just because something's recorded doesn't mean it's recommended. An evil action could serve as a warning to us now when we look back on Scripture to read it.
All right, how about we go to calls? Trent?
Sure.
Michael in Sacramento, California, listening on 1620 KSMH. Michael, why do you reject Catholic morality?
I don't entirely, but I look askance at it when I see numerous bishops, especially in our western states, calling for this acceptance of illegal immigrants which if I were in those immigrants' shoes, I would probably jump the border too, because I would be desperate to escape the situation they're in. I understand that. I relate to that as a human being. However, the argument is to respect the dignity of the human being, which is good, but how do we embrace the illegal immigrant while telling the legal immigrant, oh, you're a chump because this guy gets to cut in line in front of you? We tell the rancher in Texas and Arizona, you're a chump because these guys get to just trash your property on the way through. And we get to tell the taxpayer, you're a chump because we're going to support these people even though they're undocumented, they don't belong here, and the bishops don't seem to have these same harsh words for Mexico, which fiercely protects its southern border. It seems like a double standard. I don't get it.
All right, Michael, let's let Trent take a shot at that.
Okay, Michael, I guess I don't want to single any bishops out. We're not here in the business of policing what bishops and other clerics say necessarily, but I haven't really heard anyone say we ought to welcome illegal immigrants or not have borders at all. I'm not familiar with any bishops saying that. In fact, recently, Pope Francis, in an interview, this was back in January 22nd, he said, can borders be controlled? Yes. Each country has a right to control its borders, who enters and who leaves, and countries that are in danger of terrorism and the like have more right to control them more. So I would say, would you agree that there is a balance here? Do you see the value and a moral duty we may have to migrants in general, to those who would, let's say, they're refugees from a war-torn country?
Well, yes, and at the same time, I'm not hearing bishops in the United States saying, hey, if you're here illegally, go home. You don't belong here. Come back, follow the rules. Mm-hmm. Do you?
I haven't heard any bishops talking about encouraging people to deport themselves, but we also have to take into account, for example, the common good, that people may already be entrenched within a community, and if they were to leave, that could cause extreme hardships for families, plunge them into severe poverty, or, for example, it could be very bad for the country that they're in. So do you think, for example, there would be negative economic consequences if the 11 million undocumented workers in this country simply left tomorrow? Is it possible there would be negative economic consequences?
Well, of course, there are always going to be consequences to every action, Trent, but let me point this out. If a father is driving drunk and he creates for himself and his family a civil and criminal penalty, a lawsuit and jail time and legal expenses, does the state need to come along and say, oh, gee, you know what, that's really going to suck for your kids, so we're going to bail you out, we're going to make everything right, pretend like it didn't happen so your kids can still have their college funds instead of having to spend them on legal expenses?
Well, I think what you're saying is if someone commits a crime, it would be unjust if they were to suffer no punishment at all. Is that what you're saying?
Somebody comes into this country illegally, they have committed a crime.
Right.
They have broken U.S. law. So
Michael, could I ask you a question? Could
Sure.
we have a reasonable... Here's the thing. The church teaches about the dignity of migrants and the general right to migrate and the moral duty of countries to accept immigrants as they can, as they're able to, and the duty and the justice of maintaining borders. So it seems to me our disagreement, I would agree with you that if someone breaks the law, they need to be held accountable for that. Would you agree there can be reasonable disagreements? We can have a discussion about what would that be. Some people may say, well, if you are here illegally, the punishment should be deportation. Others may say perhaps the punishment could be a form of fines or things like that. Do you see how a Catholic could engage in a debate about what punishment is best? It doesn't necessarily have to be deportation.
Well, yes, I understand that. But at the same time, if you were an immigrant who came here legally and you came through the channels, you waited, you applied, you waited, you did all the things according to U.S. law, mm-hmm. and then somebody basically jumps in line ahead of you, having skirted the law, received some, call it amnesty, call it what you will, but it amounts to amnesty, don't you feel like, what a chump I am? I went through the channels. I obeyed U.S. law, and here this guy gets in without having to go through all that stuff.
It sounds like you're
a
chump. It sounds like you're describing someone who may be mad that a government or other people are merciful towards others. Should we be mad if mercy is granted to other people?
But where is the mercy toward the law-abiding citizen? Where is the mercy to the taxpayer who's footing the bill? Where is the mercy to the rancher in Texas whose property is trashed and littered and his animals threatened? Because all these things happen, and if you're not aware of those, it's a tension. It's a tension, and I don't pretend that there is a one solution, one size fits all answer. But what I'm not hearing from bishops is this insistence that people need to, it would be helpful, fix your own country. Because if Mexico should be a paradise given its resources. It should not be a parasite.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna move on, I think, from the call here. Though my understanding, and I'm willing to be corrected by other callers later in the show or by email, is that actually net immigration from Mexico in recent years has actually gone down. More people go from America to Mexico than the other way. That's what I've heard in that regard. But I think we'll have to move on probably from this call. But notice, I think what's happening here is that we have, and this is important when people discuss issues in Catholic morality, that there are sort of these sub-facets. There are issues where Catholics must agree, things that involve intrinsic evils, for example, or basic rights. Then there's other things where there can be disagreement. Catholics can reasonably disagree among themselves. What is the best policy to secure the common good? So, for example, Catholics must agree that there is, in general, the Church teaches a right to migrate. That someone who, especially in the case of someone who is trying to protect their family from things like ethnic cleansing, for example, or war, has a right to seek safety and shelter elsewhere, and there'd be a corresponding duty for other nations to accept these immigrants as they can. If they're not able to do that, if that destabilizes their own societies, then they just can't. But then, so that's the basic principle. But then there's, what do we do then about the sub facets? If somebody illegally immigrates, should there be a punishment? What should that be? As we said to the caller, some people might say, well, deportation. Others will say, no, that causes more harm. There's other punishments that would be, more just. And that's a disagreement Catholics can have among themselves. And, I'm not going to speak to the bishops and what each of them individually has said about this, but I would recommend going to the Catechism, and I think this actually may come up more on in the show, but the Catechism talks about immigration in paragraph 2241, though we may talk about that with one of our next callers. So, yeah, I think that we can disagree about there are the subfacets. That's fine. We can have discussion, debate, but let's also keep our focus on the main issue about the dignity of the person and always underscore that.
Trent Horn is our guest today. Trent Horn is staff apologist here at Catholic Answers and author of, among many other things, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. Our topic today, why do you reject Catholic morality? And it can be on any aspect of Catholic morality or Catholic morality in general. I mean, is there some aspect of the... And I have to say, Trent, I was a little surprised with Michael's point because it seemed that he was saying that he rejected Catholic morality because it was inconsistent on immigration, perhaps, and your answer that it's maybe inconsistent because people are free to make different prudential judgments about it didn't seem he didn't seem to accept that.
Well, I think that people may say, well, here is the solution we need to this problem. And Catholics may disagree about that if it's something that doesn't involve an intrinsic evil, that we should all be able to discuss and debate to secure the common good for every person, whatever their residential status may be in the country where they live.
888-318-7884 is the number. It's Catholic Answers Live. Why do you reject Catholic morality this hour? And we'll be right back with more calls.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
It may be true for you, but not for me. How often have you heard this during a discussion with friends or family? Whether talking about faith, morality, politics, or just the basic notion of truth, so many people are captive to the notion of relativism, the belief that reality is something we decide. In his new audio presentation, Your Truth, My Truth, apologist Carlo Broussard breaks down this intellectual cancer, looking at the different kinds of relativism we regularly encounter and demonstrating how, ultimately, they collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. More importantly, Carlo makes a powerful case for the existence of objective truth, showing you how to explain to others that right and wrong are both real and universal, because it was designed that way by God. Order your copy of Your Truth, My Truth by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Where can you find the answers to hundreds of the most common questions about the Catholic faith? Catholic Answers 20 Answers series, that's where. Clear, concise, and easy to carry, the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers Press offers hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. They're available individually at special bulk prices, or you can get a starter pack of all 20 at a very special price. And remember, you can now purchase them as ebooks for reading on your mobile devices. Call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com today to get your copies of all the titles in this exciting new series, or ask for them at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our guest this hour, Trent Horn. Our number, 888-318-7884. The topic, why do you reject Catholic morality? And Catholic morality has so many facets. You can come at that from many different angles. Maybe you reject the Catholic idea of caring for the poor, or maybe the just war theory, Catholic teaching on war and violence. Or, as we said before, birth control or sex outside of marriage or abortion, any of these things that the Catholic Church teaches. It's pretty clear. I mean, the teaching of the Catholic Church is very public. Maybe you reject it for one reason or another. We'd be happy to talk with you. 888-318-7884. As a matter of fact, we'd love to talk with you. Give us a call. 888-318-7884. Trent Horn, we go now to Vince in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, listening on 89.1 FM. Vince, you are on with Trent Horn.
Thank you so much for taking my call, Trent. My question is this. Let me preface with what I'm rejecting is the apparent contradiction in the application of the Catholic morality code. I came into the church in 2014 with an invalid marriage. My wife had been married previously, and I had not. And we got married before I came into the church. Some years before, I was told initially that I couldn't come fully into the church because of the marriage, and so I asked the priest, does it matter if I've been living in abstinence? And he said, yes, that does. If you're living as brother and sister, you can come into the church. So I did that. Well, this year, in January, I had one of my RCIA teachers ask me if I would like to go to a Cursillo movement in March, and I said absolutely. I was excited and thrilled. And then when I filled out the paperwork, and then he was going to be my sponsor, he said, "Well, the priest has said that you can't go because of your marriage, even though I'm still living abstinently from my wife." So the most important thing coming into the church is allowable and acceptable. However, for me to utilize like the Cursillo movement, the tools, I guess, so to speak, to advance my faith and help me be able to share my faith. I can't take part in that because of the invalid marriage in which I'm still living abstinently. So,
Okay.
Do I stay where I'm at and have conjugal relations and just go to confession every week, or what? I'm rejecting the application of it's not consistent. I can come into the church, but I can't go to a Cursillo movement. Can you help me with that?
I think I can, though I do commend you, Vince. As people have been discussing in the Catholic blogosphere and news a lot lately about individuals who are in invalid marriages, and speaking about whether they can receive communion or not, and whether we can expect anyone to live as brother and sister, to live chastely if they're in an invalid marriage. And many people just say, well, it can't be done. Well, you, my friend, are living proof it most certainly can be done. And so I commend you for that. And in this day and age, when people think that God's grace its power has no standing, can't hold a candle to the power of the sexual urge, it's very, very sad. Even when some Catholics say, well, yeah, there's grace, yeah, but look, you can't expect people to live this way. Yes, you can, because as St. Paul says in the letter to the Philippians, through Christ I can do all things in Christ who strengthens me. So don't give that up. Continue to let God's grace into your heart and to live the moral life you are living now. And it's wonderful to see that, to uphold the beauty and dignity of marriage and what you're doing. So I would say it's definitely, it makes no sense to say, I mean, the only argument one could give is if you were a leader in this program and there's a worry about scandal or something like that. But I would say that if you have made this commitment to living chastely, that shouldn't be an impediment at all to taking part in a retreat or any kind of other spiritual practice. Now, is the priest who said this, Vince, the same priest you spoke with about coming into the church in the first place, or a different priest?
No, actually, it's not. Since I came into the church, there has been a changing of the guard, so to speak. So, yeah, the priest that has told me that I can't go to the Cursillo movement is a different priest than the one who said that I could come into the church under the condition of chastity. So
it reminds me of what happened to the Israelites in the Exodus. It says in the book of Exodus, Joseph, a Hebrew, saved Egypt, and all the Jews were welcome to be there. And the book of Exodus says, but then there was a new Pharaoh that came into town who didn't know Joseph. And then everything fell apart for the Hebrews after that, and they were enslaved. So here's another priest that's come along who may not be as familiar with your situation. So I would recommend stay living the chaste moral life you're living. And understand that in living this life, the devil's going to throw all kinds of temptations at you, including temptations to be frustrated or want to give that up through other Catholics who are not understanding. So I pray that you don't give into that temptation. And to find a resolution here, you may want to appeal to go to maybe a larger regional director for the Cursillo movement, or a representative from the diocese, from the Office of Marriage and Family, for example, in your own diocese, to go one rung up and say, hey, here's my situation. I really want to do this. And the person involved here isn't understanding. Can you help me? It's just similar to how we would resolve an issue anywhere else. So that might be what I would recommend, but I'd also recommend to keep praying and stay strong in the face of temptations like these to want to kind of give up in frustration. So do you see what I'm saying here?
I do, and
Okay.
And you have been helpful and given me a resource, and I so much appreciate it. And I listen to the show often, a Catholic channel every day, basically. So, and it has been very helpful, and I appreciate you, Trent. Thank you so much.
No problem. Stay strong. God bless, my friend Vince. Have a good one.
Thank you, Vince. We go now to Joshua in Norman, Oklahoma. Joshua, you are on with Trent Horn.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Well, the first call with Michael about the immigration issue kind of was my same question.
He stole your thunder, but maybe there's a few remnants left.
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Did the Pope say that, in essence, it was morally wrong for a nation like the United States to take on, like it was unchristian for us to take refugees? Was he making a moral judgment on people who wouldn't do that? And the implication that I got was that, if a person didn't do that, then of course they're unchristian. And that kind of progressive, globalist, and altruistic morality is not my definition of Christianity. I don't even know if it's the Catholic definition of morality. I was just wanting to get some clarification on that.
Okay. Trent?
Okay. Well, it's always tumultuous waters to wander into the debate, did the Pope say that? Because there's lots of things the Pope is reported to have said, and I'm not familiar with the precise citation you're speaking of, though from following in the news, I've gathered that Pope Francis has said many times that it is, when he says unchristian, he's not saying a person is formerly no longer a Christian or has committed apostasy or something like that, but that it violates the spirit of the Christian faith, in particular the love of neighbor, to withhold help from the least among us, which in many cases would include migrants and especially refugees, people who are migrating for the purpose of seeking refuge from some kind of disaster, war, violence, or extreme poverty or things like that. And I would say that, Josh, that this is the core of the Christian faith does come to this, because ultimately, what does it mean to be Christian? It means that God loves us no matter who we are, because we're made in his image, and his son died on the cross for all of us to come to know him. So just as God loves each and every one of us, we're called to love each and every person, including people we don't necessarily want to love, people we don't know. Jesus even said we had to love our enemies. That's crazy. But everyone is made in the image of God, and part of that love is to be able to desire that all people come to know God in that way. So that would include the love of all of our neighbors, including the immigrant. I would say, it was funny you said, well, is this really Christian? Are you familiar with Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan?
Yes.
Well, I think one could easily retell that story nowadays in many communities where, there was a man who had been beaten by bandits, and the only one who stopped to help him was an illegal immigrant. Because, what prompted that story for Jesus to tell the Good Samaritan was that Jesus was talking essentially to a lawyer. And the lawyer says, what do I have to do to inherit the kingdom of God? And Jesus says, well, you know the commandments, love God, love your neighbor. And the lawyer wants to ask a very lawyerly question. Yeah, but who is my neighbor? If I'm a Jew, do I have to love the Gentiles? They're not really my neighbor. And the point of Christianity is that God chose to reveal himself in the Jewish people, but in the coming of Christ, now God's love and grace was expanding beyond the Jewish people to the Gentiles, to the whole world. So that includes our care for the immigrant, but it does not preclude, it doesn't mean, well, it doesn't matter, you have to, do everything you can for immigrants, don't give a second thought to it. No, you always must do what is prudent, what is best for society, but you shouldn't simply exclude someone because of where they live or their migration status. Do you see where I'm coming from here?
I do. I just think it's a little misguided to kind of narrowly define the only extension of love as opening up a country. So, I can love the poor or an immigrant by doing all sorts of things. I don't have to necessarily open up my own house to, the homeless to help them.
Sure, and I would agree, Josh, that we aren't necessarily, each individual will be called to something different in their state of life. Some people may feel called to open up their homes to refugees or migrants, and others may not. So the point is, how do we live out that call to love our neighbor? Well, can I ask you a question, though? If we love the poor, and especially a very poor migrant or refugee, how would we express that love to them?
Well, our country has given more money than any other country in world history. We could support them by, sending food. Sometimes we could, send military support, or the church could, send some monetary support. There's different ways to sanctions. We could put sanctions on.
Well, are you? And I agree with you. So it seems to me you agree the way to show love, like what the Apostle James writes in his letter, is to provide material means. And so it seems you might disagree with others about, well, where would that obligation be? Are you open to at least to allowing maybe a limited number of immigrants to settle in this country, if that's the most efficient way to provide that means, even if it's let's say a very limited number? Are you open to that as a possibility?
No, and the reason why is because we are already inundated, and we don't have. We need a time to kind of saturate the immigrants that we already have. So that
Josh? How do you know that we're incapable of welcoming even a few number of more immigrants? How do you know we're inundated and cannot provide for anyone else? I'm just curious. How did you arrive at that?
Well, capability is not the right question. Of course we could, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Okay. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're nearing our break here. But if I had to tie this up, I would say that there are people who are in desperate situations. We can send some supplies to them, but let's take, for example, refugees. Many of them, we can send them supplies, but there's no nation where they can reside in. At best, they can. Many of them simply live in refugee camps, which can be very hostile and difficult places to live. So I would say that it's interesting. I'm curious about this hesitation to want to welcome even a limited number of people to provide a better life for them and to show that love of God for them in that way. It reminds me, I guess, of a command that was given in the book of Exodus to the Israelites when they were in the Promised Land. What Exodus 22:21, in that law, it said, "You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." That, especially this country, which was only made possible through immigrants. Obviously there were Native Americans here. Through a country built on immigration, you would think that, wouldn't we not, in a responsible, prudent way, show our love for neighbor by welcoming in those, especially those who are in very, very desperate circumstances? I mean, that's we can talk more about that after the break, but the church says we must respect the dignity of migrants while also respecting prudence and the common good of society. We can find a balance here. Let's not pick an extreme when it comes to that issue.
Well, we're heavy on immigration today, but if you disagree with the church's teaching on chastity or capital punishment or euthanasia or any other aspect of the church's moral life, why do you reject Catholic morality? Trent Horn is our guest this hour. 888-318-7884 is the number, and we'd love to have your call and have that conversation with you. We'll be right back on Catholic Answers Live.
Don't you just love listening to Trent Horn? Did you know you can book Trent or any of our other great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information.
Howdy folks, this is Jimmy Akin, and I have exciting news. Starting this spring, Catholic Answers will begin airing its first ever television program. It'll be appearing on EWTN, and you'll also be able to watch it, no matter where you are, from Catholic.com using your smart TV, tablet, or other device. Catholic Answers' mission is to use every means we can to reach people with the message of Christ and His Church. But until now, television has been beyond our reach. That's about to change, and that's why we need your help right now. Producing a quality, professional television show like this is not cheap, and it can only happen with the generous support of donors like you. To make your donation, visit Catholic.com and click the Catholic Answers television banner, or call us toll-free at 888-291-9999. 8000. That's the Catholic Answers television banner at Catholic.com or call toll-free 888-291-8000.
We hear it every year. The perennial question, what are you giving up for Lent? And there's nothing wrong with doing without certain things you may have an affinity for. But this year, why not turn the question around and ask, what are you taking on for Lent? If you don't have a daily time for reading the Bible, we recommend you make one. And to help you with those difficult passages, we also recommend a daily dose of Trent Horn's latest book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Bible Difficulties. Hard Sayings is the perfect book for your Lenten journey. Trent looks at dozens of the most confounding passages in Scripture and offers clear, reasonable, and Catholic keys to unlocking their true meaning, deepening your understanding of God's holy word. Make this Lent one to remember. Order your copy of Hard Sayings today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Why do you reject Catholic morality? That's our question for this hour. And for the next hour, Trent Horn is our guest. We're very lucky to have, or very blessed to have Trent with us for 2 hours today on this very topic. So if you haven't dialed yet, go ahead and dial. We're happy to take that call, and in all likelihood, we'll get to it if you make that call, 888-318-7884. That's 888-318-7884. And we go to Tom in Los Angeles, California, listening on the mighty 930 AM Immaculate Heart Radio. Tom, you are on with Trent Horn. What's your question?
Yeah, I'll try to be succinct, and I hope you'll let me finish before you answer. I appreciate you guys are extremely wise. I have a problem with the institution of the Catholic Church being intertwined with government politics. And I think that, God set up his church, and God set up governments. And the role, in my view, of my understanding is that God set up governments for one purpose: to dole out justice. And and then the church is a separate entity. It's his body of Christ. Okay. Now, you're talking a lot about immigration. It's a classic situation where I think the Catholic institution has really let God down, because I'm not talking about legal immigration. I'm not talking about people who are here as because they're fleeing war. I'm not talking about, and I'm for immigration. But I'm for legal immigration. What I'm not for, and what I think God is not for, is illegal immigration, because illegal immigrants, for the most part, are here, and what they're doing is it's a form of theft.
Okay, Tom, hang on.
Tom,
just a quick sec. I really tried to let you finish because you asked me to let you finish, but it seems like the point is you're objecting to the Catholic Church being so connected to politics. Is that about right, Tom?
Yes, but with the illegal immigration, like I went to the Catholic Church Sanctuario in East LA, and there's prayers. They were asking Trump to do the right thing and let the government, because there's a lot of illegal immigrants in that particular parish.
Okay. All right, hang on, Tom. Let's let Trent give it a shot.
Yeah, Tom, we've gone over the issue of immigration, I think, to its satisfaction throughout this hour. So I don't want to belabor the point more, that the Church teaches that nations have a right to control and protect their borders, and they also have a right to care for migrants as best that they can. And so you're correct. Illegal immigration is a crime, and that crime needs to be managed in a way that respects the dignity of the person and the common good of society. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But your point, though, about, well, the Church is too intertwined in politics, that the state exists to dole out justice, and the Church does its thing apart from that. I don't think that means that the Church has no involvement with the state whatsoever. And here's my question. If the state is doing something unjust, should the Church do something about that?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
the Church
We have common ground there. Great.
Something about it. And also, the problem is the Catholic Church, to me, in my mind, is bigger than the government. And I think that when people are praying the rosary or praying to Mary to let the government do the right thing, I think what the priest should be saying in the prayer should be, God, Mary, please, forgive me for doing something illegal and let me have the strength to go back and do things right, because I am taking money and I'm taking resources from someone illegally.
You got to let Trent
let's
address it.
Yeah, let's okay. I think what I've been hearing a lot in the calls this hour is an interesting animus towards those who have immigrated illegally to our country, and I certainly understand the hardship that many people face in that regard. The example of ranchers who suffer violence or damage to their lands. Obviously, those things would be wrong, and breaking a country's laws, there should be consequences for that. I certainly agree, but. Well, one, hearing that, another, and once again, if someone wants to correct me later, that's fine. My understanding is that immigrants actually they still pay a fair share of taxes back into the countries where they work, providing for their economies through things like sales tax, other things like this, and don't collect certain government benefits because of that. But that's a separate issue. That's a separate issue. It seems to me that what I'm hearing from the callers is, well, if the church was really Christian, it would tell immigrants to immediately self-deport or encourage their deportation. And that's not a teaching of the church. That's up to people to discuss and dialogue about whether that is the most prudent solution for those who exist, those who live illegally in a certain country. That is one solution, but it's quite forceful to say, well, if you were truly Christian, you would promote that solution. Well, when I look at Jesus in the Gospels and the love he calls us for others, I don't see that. What I see is the understanding what St. Paul says in Galatians 3:28, is that in Christ there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, neither male and female. We're one in Christ Jesus. And so we have to understand then is to respect the dignity of other people, not to infringe on our property rights, not to flagrantly violate the sovereignty of different nations, but at the same time to simply label a group of people as just, ne'er-do-wells, as just a scourge, and to remove them will solve our problems. I'm very skeptical of that approach as well. But once again, that doesn't go back to the main teaching of the church, which I've reiterated several times in this broadcast. These are issues of reasonable disagreement about immigration policy Catholics can have and do have, and we should continue to have that dialogue. But let's not cut it short by saying, well, my way on this prudential judgment is the Catholic way, and that's it. Sorry, the church gives us these general principles on issues like immigration. Then we have to do the hard work of seeing how they apply and respect the dignity of all people, regardless, as I said before, of their legal or residential status.
And I have to say, I'm impressed that our callers seem to have accepted all of the church's teaching on abortion and chastity, birth control, just war, capital punishment, caring for the poor. It's just immigration that we have a problem with today.
Usually the only immigrants our callers have a problem with are the unborn trying to get here. But
today,
who knows? We have another hour.
That's right. We do have another hour coming up. Another hour with Trent Horn. Why do you reject Catholic morality? Any aspect of Catholic morality? We're happy to take that call. 888-318-7884. We'll be right back on Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back for our second hour on Catholic morality, and specifically we're asking you the question, why do you reject Catholic morality, whether it has to do with sexual relationships or war or capital punishment or any other aspect of the Catholic moral teaching. Why do you reject it? We'd love to have that conversation with you. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. I am your host, Cy Kellett, and our guest this hour, apologist Trent Horn, who is the staff apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of Answering Atheism, Persuasive Pro-Life, and, of course, this book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. And when I say this book, that means I'm holding it up for those of you joining us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Periscope, and I have neglected to mention you today, so thank you for being with us via those media. And if you have a question, you can give us a call, or you can type it in right there on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or Periscope. Trent, we now go to Anonymous in Columbus, Ohio, listening on 8:20 a.m. Anonymous, you are on with Trent Horn. What do you object to in Catholic morality?
Greetings. If a Catholic couple marries and gets a civil divorce, and one of the partners marries, the other partner in the valid marriage is expected to be celibate until either their partner dies or comes back to them. Is that correct?
Well, Anonymous, what the church teaches is essentially what Jesus taught in the Gospels when Jesus was asked about divorce. And what Jesus said was this. He said in Mark chapter 10, he said that when a man and woman are joined together as husband and wife, in Mark 10, he says, the two shall become one, so they're no longer two but one. Mark 10:9, he says, what therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. And then Jesus reiterates and says, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. So the church teaches what Jesus taught, that marriage is the lifelong union of a man and woman, and if one partner in a marriage initiates divorce and leaves, that marriage is still valid. They're still married even if they're civilly divorced, because no one can dissolve that marriage, let man not put asunder what God has joined. Only death can dissolve that. If it is a valid marriage between two people, and especially in Christian circumstances, two baptized Christians. So remarriage would constitute adultery in that case, provided that the previous marriage was valid. So that would be the church's teaching. Was that just, you just had a question about this, or did you have a
my
personal?
My question wasn't on the divorce partner. My question was on the partner that remains.
Yeah.
The other partner is not expected to enter into a conjugal relationship with anyone else unless his or her spouse dies. Is that correct?
If they have a valid marriage,
yes,
then,
if they have a valid marriage.
Yes,
so they remain celibate for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
For their life or the life of the other spouse, they would be by celibate. Celibate's not the same thing as engaging in sexual relations. That's being incontinent. But it is, they would not be permitted to marry, because they are still married to that other person, even though they've undergone a civil divorce. And I want to continue the conversation with you, Anonymous. I know this is a hard teaching for people to accept. I fully I appreciate that, and I'm encouraged to have a conversation more about that. Do you feel, now that you have clarification, this is a teaching you don't accept? Is that where you're coming from?
Well, if the person has sex, if the other person, who didn't marry again, has sex, are they committing adultery?
Yes, they would be. Well, yes, they would, and also they would be having sex outside of marriage, whether it's with a new spouse or just with somebody else. Yes, that's what Jesus taught. Yes.
Okay. Well, I just think that's. I've experienced a friend of mine who went through that, and he was basically psychologically devastated.
Yeah.
The divorce happened at 31 years old, when he was 31, and he never really. I would think a lot of people who knew him never recovered from that, because he was a devout Catholic. His family was devout, and he never could deal with the fact that he would be seriously. He would enter his sin, and he could not be with anyone else, and that was for the rest of his life. You're talking about a 31-year-old
because his wife divorced him,
and she remarried, and she was not coming back. So he was expected as a young man not to ever be with anyone else for the rest of his life as a Catholic.
But it's interesting though, when he entered into the marriage with her, he promised and understood he would never be with anyone else but her, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I mean, he already was of the mindset, I'll never be with anyone else but my wife, but now a circumstance has arisen where he cannot be with his wife because his wife has left him. And what I would say, Anonymous, is that there's not an easy answer I can give to situations like these, except that in this life, through things like sin, and even just being mortal and being in this life, God gives each of us different crosses to bear. And some of us he's given very heavy crosses. Take, for example, in marriage, there are cases where two people marry, and shortly after their marriage, one of them becomes sick or in an accident suddenly becomes incapable of engaging in sexual relations anymore. This happens to people. And so, and this is something I've known other people who their wives, have complications from childbirth, and they can have sexual relations. They have to be very, very, very careful about it, and they engage in long periods of abstinence. So we get different crosses that are placed on us in this life. And the question is going to be, what are we going to choose? Are we going to choose saying, God, through this other person's sin, my spouse has left me, they've hurt me and I am hurting. Are we going to choose, I want to go my way and choose this sin I have a right to because I was sinned against? Or will we say, God, I've seen the ugliness of sin. I'm not going to answer sin with sin. I'm going to answer it with grace, and I'm asking for you to help me here. So do you see that I can't give an easy answer, but I can give a short answer, which is when we are sinned against, God calls us to respond with grace, not more sin. And he can give us the grace to do that. So do you at least see where I'm coming from, Anonymous?
I believe I can get an understanding with more study of what you mean.
Okay. Well, that's a start. So definitely thank you for calling on that, and keep that in mind. That I think it's hard for people in our day and age. We don't think, it's so tragic. We don't think of marriage as being this lifelong bond that only death can dissolve it. We just don't think of that. It's just so hard. We live in a society where marriage is just basically a certificate and a fancy party and a white dress you say yes to. And so that if things just aren't working out, we go somewhere else. But that was never God's plan for marriage. That what's beautiful about God's plan for marriage is that it's sexually exclusive, lifelong, and two really become one till death do them part, for their good and the good of any children that may proceed from their union. So I'd also recommend a good book on marriage. Might be The Good News About Sex and Marriage by Christopher West, if you want to look at further study. But I am grateful that you called, and keep listening, and maybe we'll have you back on another show as you read more if you have more questions.
When we come back from this break, we'll take more calls on why you reject Catholic morality. That's what we're looking for. If there's any aspect of Catholic morality, from abortion, sex outside of marriage, birth control, capital punishment, any aspect of chastity that you want to say, well, no, I don't accept that part of Catholic morality, we're happy to take that call and discuss it with you. Trent Horn is our guest. 888-318-7884 is our number. That's 888-31-TRUTH. This is Catholic Answers Live, and we'll be right back.
Catholic Answers. Our success depends on you.
We hear it every year. The perennial question, what are you giving up for Lent? And there's nothing wrong with doing without certain things you may have an affinity for. But this year, why not turn the question around and ask, what are you taking on for Lent? If you don't have a daily time for reading the Bible, we recommend you make one. And to help you with those difficult passages, we also recommend a daily dose of Trent Horn's latest book, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Bible Difficulties. Hard Sayings is the perfect book for your Lenten journey. Trent looks at dozens of the most confounding passages in Scripture and offers clear, reasonable, and Catholic keys to unlocking their true meaning, deepening your understanding of God's holy word. Make this Lent one to remember. Order your copy of Hard Sayings today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Trent Horn, our guest this hour, and the topic, why do you reject Catholic morality? And I've just tried to give you some hints about what Catholic morality teaches and see if you disagree with any of them or you reject them and you have a reason why. We would love to hear that, whether it's abortion, sex outside of marriage, birth control, the Catholic teaching on war or capital punishment, on caring for the poor. I think we've covered immigration, so I may not go back to that one. We'll see. That's a 50-50 right now. But if you have some disagreement with Catholic morality, we're very happy to take that call and discuss it with you. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Trent, we go now to another anonymous in Kearney, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Anonymous, you are on with Trent Horn. What's your question?
Yeah, my question kind of piggybacks well off the last one, and it has to do with sex outside of marriage. I was raised Catholic, so it's not so much rejecting the Catholic belief. I went away from the church for like 25 years, and I'm trying to find my way back in. But in those 25 years, I met a man, and we've been going together, sleeping together for the last 20 years. Well, now that I'm getting back to the faith, I want to be able to get that squared. And he was married before. Neither of them were baptized in any church, so I'm not sure if that has a bearing. But I'm looking for a way to explain to him why it's not okay to not be married. I talked to a priest about it, and he gave me all of the logic about starting a family, but we're both too old to have a family, so that argument doesn't really work to help convince him that we need to start doing it right. And I was just wondering what would be a good reason that might help him see that I want to kind of clean this up and get back to the church in all ways.
Sure. Now, Anonymous, let me sort through the situation a little bit. You are a baptized Catholic who has been away from the church for a while. You are in a romantic relationship with this man. Have you ever been married before, or you're just in this relationship with this gentleman?
No, I have never been married. He was.
He was. Is he Catholic?
No, neither him nor his ex-wife were baptized in any religion.
Okay. Well,
so I don't know if he's even free to marry.
Right. What would come about here then is, even if he was never baptized, his wives were never baptized, the church still presumes that they were in a valid marriage. However, two non-baptized people, if you are in a marriage with someone who is, has never been baptized, between two non-baptized individuals, that can be dissolved aside from death. So that's not indissoluble. It's only a sacramental marriage between two baptized Christians that's valid, would be indissoluble. So what would happen here is that still it's presumed to be valid, and the church understands that marriage, even if it's between people who are not baptized, that for it to be valid, there's the presumption that it's supposed to be lifelong. There's that pledge of unity and fidelity. So what you would have to do is, if you two, would you want to marry this man, or are you two, is marriage somewhere in the cards? I know you're older in years, but is that something either of you is open to?
I would like to. He has some reservations on it because he sees it as a piece of paper that's a false sense of security, and I can understand that just because of his experience in his first.
Yeah.
But
So,
the other part of me goes, but don't I deserve something that's real?
And you do. And you most certainly do. That if this man, regardless of how old he is, how old you are, if he wants you to give yourself to him in an intimate way, to give your whole self to him, then he doesn't have a right to that piecemeal. He on his terms, that for what God planned for us, if we're to give ourselves fully and freely to one another, that's why God created the bond of marriage. It's something for all people. All people recognize, whether they're Christian or not. So what I'd recommend in this situation, that one, I guess, for the both of you to go to see for you to see a priest first, that I would like to encourage you to come back to the faith, to the mercy of God through the sacrament of confession, and let God lift any of the burdens that have been placed on you in your heart over these decades, really, and to be free from them. And from there, to accept God's call to live a chaste and holy life. And God will give you the grace to do that. He's giving you the grace all these decades, and you feel that pull to want to come back to the church, to that pull of God's love. So I would recommend to do that, to go to confession, to seek out a priest, and to make a pledge to live this chaste life. And if this man really loves you, then he'll make that promise to you, however both long you have to live, the promise to be only true to one another. Now, if he's been married before, at that point, if you two could move towards marriage, there'd be an investigation to see if his other marriages are valid, or if there's a possibility that they could be dissolved for him to marry you because you are baptized even though he is not. And that is a possibility. So I would talk to a priest and then talk to the tribunal in your diocese when it comes to marriage. So, but the steps would be reconciliation for yourself, going to, with God and with the church, the resolution to live a holy life, to follow God's commandments, and then to find a healthy course for this relationship you are in with this man, and to sort out his past marriages and to investigate the possibility to continue your relationship towards marriage, if that's where it's called. So I guess that's kind of the roadmap I'd look towards. Is that at least helpful, Anonymous?
Well, it is kind of, but I'm kind of trying to figure out a way that I can explain to him why it's so important to me. Because I've been for the last year going, I really want to go to confession, but then we get together and it's like I don't have what it takes to turn him down, and
I see.
It's one of those things of I don't want to go to confession,
yeah,
and then the next week be in the same boat going, okay, I was just kidding, God,
I think Anonymous,
I don't know how to
sure
address that issue and get him to understand, because when I have brought up abstinence with him, and I bring it up in terms of I really want to get back to the church, and see where this goes, then he all of a sudden goes absolute extremism to where you're breaking up with me and you never want to see me again. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I need to put God first here.
That's right. That's the exact correct attitude. In the Gospels, Anonymous, Jesus was speaking to the disciples, to the apostles, and he said in Matthew 19:29, he said, "Everyone who has left houses or brothers, sisters, father, mother, children, or lands for my name's sake will receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life." Jesus understands that if we choose to follow him, that may, sometimes people we are friends with or romantically involved with will understand and support us, but many people in this life won't. And we do have to make a choice sometimes. I'll choose God, or I'll choose this person that wants to lead me away from God, not towards God. And what God wants us to do is to always choose him and not choose those who would lead us away from God. And sometimes we get tempted. We think, well, I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to be lonely. God, I love this person. I want to be with them. But ultimately, that person will never give us the joy in our hearts, that surpassing joy that God gives us. So I would tell him, you'll have to just tell him, look, God is the number one thing in my life. He created me. He loves me. He has a plan for me and for my eternal soul and for you. And I love you, and I want to share that with you. But if you don't see that the way I do, then maybe this relationship is not to be for us. And ultimately, I would say, you could say to him, if you love me, if you want what's best for me, you see, I believe this is what's best for me. And if you love me, will you help me to see that? And if you don't think it's what's best for me, that's such a fundamental difference. Maybe we have to take some time apart to figure this out. So I think that ultimately, to know, Anonymous, you deserve love, you are God's beloved, and if this gentleman wants to treat you as his beloved, he would not put anything between you and God, and to always choose God over anything that would lead us away from him. So are those helpful words to... I know it's a tough path, but is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, God bless, Anonymous, and let's pray for you that it's a struggle. Every struggle every day in life, I think, is a choice between, do we choose God or do we choose something that seems good in this world? We know it leads us away. It's like a mirage. It looks good. We know it leads us away from God, but it looks so good. But ultimately, it's going to leave us unsatisfied. That's the dilemma we face every day, both in big decisions and small ones. So we'll pray for you, Anonymous, and to continue your path, not to the mirage, but to the true joy we find in Jesus.
Thank you so much for that call, Anonymous. Our topic this hour, why do you reject Catholic morality? Our guest, Trent Horn, taking your calls at 888-318-7884. We go to Jonathan in Lake Forest, California, watching on YouTube. Jonathan, you are on with Trent Horn.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Jonathan.
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to thank Trent for all he does. I'm a young returning Catholic, I guess you could say. The thing is with me, my best friends, all of them have been Protestant. Actually, my ex-girlfriend was also a Protestant belief, and I've actually just recently joined a club, a Christian club, which is dominant in Protestant believers. And so my question was, how different is Protestant morality and theology compared to Catholic? What are the main reasons in a nutshell? And my main question is, how do I go about keeping my morality while not buckling to aggressive attacks to my faith or beliefs?
Sure, great question. Number one, Protestant is an umbrella term. You have all kinds of Protestant groups underneath that term, some that are closer to what Catholics believe, like Anglicans, some Lutherans. You could call them Protestants, they're not really, but Eastern Orthodox believers, they're non-Catholic Christians. So some are close, others would be further away. So they vary, but I would recommend, as we come here to our end, Jonathan, have good Catholic friends. Find Catholic friends that will build you up, that agree with you, so it's not always fight. It's okay to have Protestant friends, Catholic friends that support you. Go to Mass, avail yourself of the sacraments, have a firm foundation in the truth so you can be a witness to others who might disagree.
We'll be right back with more on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
It may be true for you, but not for me. How often have you heard this during a discussion with friends or family? Whether talking about faith, morality, politics, or just the basic notion of truth, so many people are captive to the notion of relativism, the belief that reality is something we decide. In his new audio presentation, Your Truth, My Truth, apologist Carlo Broussard breaks down this intellectual cancer, looking at the different kinds of relativism we regularly encounter and demonstrating how, ultimately, they collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. More importantly, Carlo makes a powerful case for the existence of objective truth, showing you how to explain to others that right and wrong are both real and universal, because it was designed that way by God. Order your copy of Your Truth, My Truth by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Where can you find the answers to hundreds of the most common questions about the Catholic faith? Catholic Answers 20 Answer Series, that's where. Clear, concise, and easy to carry, the 20 Answer Series from Catholic Answers Press offers hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. They're available individually at special bulk prices, or you can get a starter pack of all 20 at a very special price. And remember, you can now purchase them as ebooks for reading on your mobile devices. Call 1-888-291-8000 or visit the shop at Catholic.com today to get your copies of all the titles in this exciting new series, or ask for them at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Are you too critical of yourself? Or maybe someone in your life is a persistent critic? Tomorrow on EWTN Radio, don't miss More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. They'll help you effectively respond to your worst critics, even if that critic is you. More to Life airs weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And coming up right after Catholic Answers Live, former U.S. Army chaplain Dana Krull discusses his conversion to Catholicism with host Marcus Grodi. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. So happy to have you with us here today on this Monday of Lent. Nothing special happens on Monday. You can eat meat on Mondays of Lent, Tuesdays of Lent, but it's still Lent. Hope your Lent is going well. Why do you reject Catholic morality is the question we are putting out to you, the listener, today. Why do you reject Catholic morality? Trent Horn is taking your questions and turning them into answers. Trent Horn, a staff apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of this book that's sitting right here with me on the desk, Hard Sayings, A Catholic Approach to Answering Bible Difficulties. Trent, we have Agnes in San Diego here, listening on 1000 AM Immaculate Heart Radio. Agnes, what did you want to say to Trent Horn?
Hi, Trent. I had a question in regards to homosexuality and family life. I completely understand and accept the Church's teaching as far as upholding the sacrament of marriage. So in regards to conversations and debates among my peers, I think we understand the Church's position on the sacrament of marriage. But then I've been posed the question of, well, in the case of adoption, what is the Church's position on adopting children if the couple or the individual is homosexual themselves? And I haven't been able to give a clear explanation as to, what is our position in that, since I've always been posed the statement, love is love. And would you really leave an infant or a child in need? Would it be better for them to stay in a foster home than to be in, a loving home, but maybe headed by those of the homosexual lifestyle? So I don't really know what to say. So could you help me?
Well, when this has come up in the United States, for example, it's usually come about with places like Catholic Charities and adoption services, where the choice is not between a child living in some kind of foster care or community adoption setting or being adopted by a same-sex couple. Typically what happens is it's a choice between a opposite sex couple or a man and woman, and there is also a same-sex couple, and the Catholic charity or the Catholic organization sets a preference or does not allow the same-sex couple to adopt. They prefer the opposite-sex couple, or they may even say we prefer male and female, and neither single parents nor same-sex couples, depending on the different situations involved. So, well, why would that be? Well, the church would operate from the principle that children have rights, that adoption is not about the parents, the adopters per se. It's always about what is in the best interest of the child. And through adoption, we always try to give back to the child what they've lost. Now, their biological parents can never be duplicated, but we can give the best replacement we can. And God in his wisdom has ordered the world so that when babies come into the world, they have a mother and father for a good reason, that it's complementary to one another, that the mother and father help a child grow to understand the role of men and women, how to relate to one another, how to be a healthy man, a healthy woman, how to relate to people of the opposite sex and the same sex. And the church wants to maintain that ordered biological structure of the family in adoptions. Now, our culture has a very just different view about, love is love. It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as sexual orderedness. The culture is a very different view. And so the church, though, believes the child has a right to be raised by their mother and father, and if that can't happen, by a mother and father, that the best substitute to that. And to purposely deny them a mother and father would be wrong, and that would happen with same-sex adoption. So do you see where I'm coming from here?
Yeah, and I just see my peers basically countering against, we're basically saying a single-parent home is better than that of a homosexual household with two loving parents.
I
guess for me, I just see them countering me, and I can't seem to.
Sure, the lovingness aside, because I'll say about this. Let's say, for example, you have a situation where, let's say, in a more impoverished country, two nuns basically adopt a child, and they take care of this child in their convent because nobody else will. Let's say it's a very impoverished place. I'm not necessarily even opposed that in that situation, when this child's either on the streets or is taken in and raised by a quote-unquote same-sex couple, between one of those two alternatives where you don't have anything else on the table, in that loving situation, that's fine. But what we need to look at here, though, is also the presence of ordered sexuality. When the church places children for adoption and they have a choice between here's a couple that exhibits ordered and healthy sexuality, and here's where sexuality is disordered, would we place a child there? Is that what's best for the child? I think you and your friends, the disagreement ultimately is not going to be about adoption per se, but about the morality of same-sex behavior. That for them, well, I don't think same-sex behavior is a big deal, so let them adopt. It's not disordered in any way. That's the root of the disagreement. So like an analogy I might offer is, well, let's say you have a child, you have a man and woman who want to adopt the child, and there's a polygamous couple, a man and three women or four women. Should a church be able to say, well, no, we want to teach a child that marriage is a union of only two people. We believe that's the most healthy way for them to be raised. That would be another example of saying, well, look, there's disordered sexuality here, and the church has an obligation to help a child be raised in a healthy environment. So it's ultimately, you see how it's ultimately going to come back to with your friends, what should children be given placed in a family that most closely resembles their natural biological family, and where does the role of the sexual morality and health and the naturalness of the couple, what role does that play? Whether it's same-sex couple, it's homosexual or polygamous, that's going to be the root of the disagreement. Do you see where it really is in this?
I do. So in the church's position of homosexuality, if a person finds themselves having homosexual tendencies, but does not actually engage in the sexual act or physical, impulses,
Mm-hmm.
is that person still abiding or still within the parameters of what the church teaches as far as morality? Like, I guess I get conflicted because when I hear us going against homosexuality, it's usually connected to the actual, because they are engaging in sexual activities outside of the sacrament of marriage and obviously physically going against physical nature. But if they don't physically act or find it upon themselves to have that self-discipline to not engage in such activities, does that still fall within the moral standards of our church?
Yes. If you look at the Catechism in paragraph 2359, what the church teaches is that homosexual persons are called to chastity by the virtues of self-mastery that teach them inner freedom, at times by the support of disinterested friendship, in the sense of platonic friendship. By prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. So the idea here is that all of us have inclinations. We have concupiscence, is the fancy word for it, that we have an attraction to the flesh in an unhealthy way, sexual desires that spring from us, from our fallen natures, that just come from within. We can't necessarily control them, but we can control whether we indulge in them or not, including even our own thoughts. So what the church uses for everyone, whether they have deep-seated attractions to people of the same sex or the opposite sex, because you can have cases of married men and women who find themselves attracted to people they're not married to. Having the attractions themselves is not sinful, but to indulge in thoughts about them or living out those inclinations through actions, that is where the sin would come into play. That is where the disorder would be manifested in actuality, and so in behavior, I should say. And so that you're right. So the inner dispositions, our attractions, are not sinful in and of themselves, and we are called to self-mastery and prayer to live out our lives in God's grace, regardless of what attractions we may have. So is that a helpful answer?
Yes, that is. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you, Trent. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Don't you just love listening to Trent Horn? Did you know you can book Trent or any of our other great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information.
Hi, this is Trent Horn, and I'm here to tell you about my new book, Hard Sayings, a Catholic approach to answering Bible difficulties. Have you ever read something in the Bible that confused you? Or has a skeptic ever asked you to explain a scandalous passage and you didn't know what to say? Doesn't Genesis contradict science? Why does the Bible promote slavery? How could God order his people to kill women and children? It's happened to just about everyone. But now you have a place to turn for the answers. In Hard Sayings, I look at dozens of the most confounding passages in Scripture and offer clear, reasonable, and Catholic keys to unlocking their true meaning. After reading this book, you'll be equipped to answer the toughest questions skeptics ask about the Bible. So don't be left without an answer again. Order your copy of Hard Sayings today by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Luke 6:36, Jesus said to his disciples, "Be merciful, just as your heavenly Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." He wanted them to meet persecution with a superhuman charity that demands the absolute surrender of the self to God's purposes. He cautioned them not to judge themselves better than others, and that correction must always begin with themselves. But he was not telling them to stop using their intellects in the cause of distinguishing right from wrong. He told them to imitate their Heavenly Father's mercy, after all. As we all know, the Father's mercy often expresses itself by correcting and holding people accountable. He shows us that love must always be our motivation. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
One more segment with Trent Horn on why do you reject Catholic morality? Do you reject Catholic morality? Any aspect of Catholic morality, from chastity to capital punishment to just war theory to immigration? We're happy to take your calls. 888-318-7884. We go to Mike in Columbus, Ohio. Mike, you are on with Trent Horn.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
So I have my friends have kind of been pushing natural family planning on me, and I've looked into it quite a bit, and I guess I'm just a little bit confused because the whole like planning aspect doesn't sit well with me, and I don't know how to approach it. I guess I kind of thought when I got married that getting married meant having children. So I don't know why I would want to plan my family.
Well, that's an interesting question, Mike. Yes, when we marry as Catholics, we promise to be open to life and that the fulfillment of marriage is found in having children. But God also gave us rational minds. He helped us to understand what is prudent, what's a good decision that we should make. And one of the things he gave us is the ability to understand when a couple is fertile or not fertile, and how to choose when to engage in sexual relations to plan, for example, the number of children to have or when someone would have a child. Would you agree that a couple may want to have children but might decide they could only care for a certain number or at a certain time?
Well, yeah, but would you agree that God will provide? I mean, like, we live in the richest country in the world.
Uh-huh. Well, just because we live in a prosperous country doesn't mean people have every couple is prosperous. There's many people in the United States that are trying very hard to get by on very meager means. But what if God were to say, I had, imagine I decided to have 15 children on a very, very low salary, and I purposely chose to have this many, and I go to heaven and I say, God, God will provide. God says, yeah, I provided you with the means to have this number of children. It just seems to me that, Mike, wouldn't it be, for example, we have to practice prudence. Like, for example, if a couple spends 80% of their income on something like rent, for example, and they don't leave enough over for food, and they simply say, well, God will provide, isn't that just a shorthand excuse for them to act irresponsibly in that avenue?
Well, yeah, but I don't know anyone with 15 children. We're talking...
I know people with 12 who can
sure,
provide.
Sure.
So I'm just saying, Mike, we should be responsible when it comes to caring for our children. Would you agree?
I should.
Okay.
But I don't think we should use that as an excuse to reject God's will for our family.
Well, how does a person know? What do you mean by God's will for someone's family? What do you mean by that?
Well, be fruitful and multiply. Doesn't the church teach that that's one of the purposes of marriage is to have children?
Sure, but wouldn't someone fulfill that purpose even if they have one child?
Well, yeah, they would, but that doesn't...
Mike, let's look at it this way. Would they fulfill the purpose if they received the children from God they felt like they could care for? Wouldn't they be fulfilling God's purpose if they say, well, we raised the number of children we reasonably felt that we could? Like, for example, would you agree that if a family feels like they're stretched thin with 4 children, they've got no money left over at the end of each month, it's pretty tight, it would be irresponsible for them to go out and adopt a 5th child?
It would, but that's relative. Stretched pretty thin is relative.
But would you say, though, are there circumstances where a family feels like,
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to me that where all we would disagree is, Yeah, I want to follow you through with this where we're going. I'm glad that you understand. Many people don't. That part of marriage is having children. That's awesome that you get that, because a lot of people just can't see that obvious reality of marriage. But it seems to me, I'm trying to see where your disagreement lies, that we have to keep having children in order to fulfill God's will. I would say a couple should responsibly receive the children they can care for. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but we're kind of on the same page. It seems in my particular parish, there's kind of like an overemphasis on natural family planning. So I don't want, I couldn't handle 15 children, but 4 or 6 doesn't seem unreasonable. And it seems like 80% of the time I hear about natural family planning, and 20% of the time I hear about, the blessings of large families.
And I think, Mike, the reason you might hear that a lot more, like natural family planning, is so that people, to give them an alternative to the culture's easy sell of contraception. That it's just such. Yeah. Do you see where I'm saying that?
Yeah.
I mean, the culture is just throwing at them this key to solving your problems. If you feel stressed out, worried about family, number of children, the key to your problems, my friend, is to go down to the pharmacy, go to your doctor, get a prescription, pick up this, and your problems go away. I mean, and that is a seductive, false promise in our culture. So the church is going to, and I agree, and I actually agree with you, Mike, in the sense that when I talk to people about natural family planning, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a great way to plan your family, great way to make sure you don't have too many children that you can't care for." And I'll remind them, well, natural family planning, yes, it helps you plan so that maybe if you don't feel as if you can have a child. But one of the other great things is if you're struggling with infertility, natural family planning is a very efficient way to track fertility so you can have a child. I've known many people who were diagnosed with infertility but went to a natural family planning physician and were actually helped to have a child through this method. So I agree with you. There can be an imbalance in how it's presented, but I think part of that imbalance arises is because the church is trying to fight a culture that heavily, heavily promotes contraception. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, definitely give that some more thought, and I'd recommend our friend Jason Everett has a great website, chastityproject.com, has resources on contraception. I think One More Soul is another organization. Cy, is that correct? They have some good resources on that.
They do indeed. Yep.
Alrighty, very good. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for calling in. Hopefully we'll catch you on another time.
Thank you, Mike. Robert, in Redding, California, you are on with Trent Horn. What do you reject in Catholic morality?
Not so much reject, just a brilliant show, guys. And Trent, just a question kind of along the sexual morality and ethics is, if a couple is using contraception, whether inside the church, which we know some parishes upwards of 80% or more, or outside the Catholic Church, before they get married, during the marriage prep, and after, are they actually consummating their marriage? Because we're seeing a lot of controversy over communion to divorced and whether that's pastorally being taken into account. But I guess the real question is it consummated when their couple is using contraception?
Yes, there may be a question about the validity of a marriage that perpetually uses contraception and the couple, or at least one of the partners, is not open to life in any way, shape, or form, and is opposed to that from before the marriage on through it. So there may be a question about validity, but if the couple engages in the marital act, if that act takes place, even if there are things to try to contracept it or to prevent the procreative end of it, if the act is achieved, even once, then the marriage has been consummated. The two became one flesh. There may not have been an important end, may have been blocked in that, but the act itself still took place even if contraception were used. So if the act took place, it would be consummated, but some perpetual uses of contraception could question the validity of marriage in certain cases. But I'm not saying someone who just used contraception, who just habitually used it, would necessarily be in an invalid marriage. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that if a couple used contraception on their wedding night, if they did that, it would still be a valid and consummated marriage because they engaged in the marital act.
Thank you, Robert. Let's get as many as we can in before the top of the hour here. Trent, we go to Kalima in Portland, Oregon, listening on Modern Day Radio. Kalima, you're on with Trent Horn.
Hello, guys. I appreciate your show, and I listen to it as often as I can.
Well done. Good taste.
I have a question. I guess it's all kind of been tied as far as contraception goes, because I understand our Catholic theology. I'm actually attending RCIA, the local parish here, so soon to be, chosen amongst the chosen. But I do have a question as far as abortion and people who aren't Catholic, that don't necessarily believe as much as we do in life and the sanctity of marriage, and that sex is for procreation and procreation is reserved for those who are married. How do we convey, kind of effectively, I guess, how do we get people to our side, so to speak? Because I would obviously, abortion shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be a thing that should be legal. And I think in my state of Oregon, it's legal through all 9 months, which is atrocious. So is there no moral ground then for proposing contraception in place of abortion for people who are not Catholic? Like, is that a moral stance we can take?
No, it's not, because what we would be doing here is we're answering one evil with another. For example, that would be like saying, well, let's try to answer child molestation by giving pedophiles child pornography instead. And it's just an analogy. I'm not saying people who support abortion or contraception are pedophiles. It's an analogy that to answer one evil with another evil, that is not how the church should approach these issues. And I'm also skeptical of this method working, because I know people say, well, if you give people contraception, there'll be less unintended pregnancies and less abortions. My thoughts on that would be as follows. First, the goal of the pro-life movement, the goal of the Catholic Church on this issue is to restore the right to life of the unborn. And so the problem here is that giving contraception doesn't change people's attitudes to see the unborn are worth valuing, that they deserve a right to life. It doesn't contribute to that in any way. Second, if anything, it may devalue that. It may cause people to think that the unborn don't matter as much. I was at a university once, and the student said, "Why aren't you passing out condoms?" And I said, "Well, there's condoms at your campus health center." He said, "Yeah, but that's 200 yards away from here. I don't want to walk that far." I mean, so you see that in promoting contraception, we're promoting an anti-life, anti-responsibility mentality towards children, a contraceptive mentality that leads to an abortive mentality. And I talk about that a little bit in my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, which you can always check out to see more. But thanks for calling, and we'll pray for you in your RCIA process. Keep moving towards the truth.
Thank you so much, Kalima. Thank you to everyone who called today. Thank you, Trent Horn.
And thank you, Cy Kellett.
It's been a pleasure being with you for 2 hours today on Catholic Answers Live. Well, I guess we'll be back in, I don't know, how many hours is it? 22 hours. See you again in 22 hours on Catholic Answers Live.